right, hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for staying this afternoon. My name is Raymond Cheng, and I'm the co-founder at Kariba Labs, where we are building a tool called Open Source Observer. Open Source Observer aims to measure the impact of open source software, where we believe that's going to be the key to unlocking value in impact markets for open source software. So, as part of the founding team for HyperCerts, you might have seen this diagram before in previous talks. Right now, today, we live in a world where open source software pretty much just focuses on the right-hand side of things. We have incredible developers building open source software that basically the entire economy in the world is built on top of, generating incredible impact today, but with historically, infamously, chronically underfunded public good. What we want to do with Open Source Observer is help flesh out this left-hand side of the picture. Illuminate what is the type of impact, downstream impact that we're having from open source software to the real applications that exist today, to the users that are using them, so that we can help imbue value to HyperCerts so that prospective, retroactive funders can come in, buy HyperCerts, and support this work. I think this is the vision that we're trying to build towards, a world where we can retroactively fund public goods that's delivering value to the world. At the end of the day, we firmly believe that impact should equal profit. Today, with respect to grants, when you receive a grant, the amount of reward that you get is pretty much fixed, no matter how much impact you generate. And we believe that it should be the case that people are incentivized to generate more impact, and the more impact that they generate should lead to more financial rewards. So with Open Source Observer, we're trying to build a tool here that helps internet economies measure the impact of open source contributions to the growth and adoption of their platform. As of today, we're predominantly focusing in the short term on crypto networks, predominantly because it's much easier to measure. We can take a look at open source software contributions on GitHub. We can see where these open source libraries exist in the software supply chain, basically the dependency tree. And in the crypto world, we can actually also see all user analytics because transactions are entirely on chain. So we can measure high value users, we can measure retention, we can measure funnels and life cycle of users, and we can measure for any particular library, like ethers, the types of downstream impact, all the applications that would be affected if such a library were to go away, and the number of users that would be affected if such a library were to go away. We want to bring all these things together into an easy to use platform. We think of Open Source Observer as basically Moneyball for open source. This is, we equate or we liken open source funding today kind of like how baseball was in the 1900s, using outdated methods without a real clear understanding of what led to success. That's kind of the world that we live in today. And we want to transform that. This is a fantastic movie, fantastic book. If you guys haven't read or watched it before, it's on most airplane flights. If you guys are flying somewhere, you can probably see this on your flight home. But in the movie, based on a true story, Billy Bean here, played by Brad Pitt, is trying to disrupt this old school stodgy world where recruiters mostly hired players based on their gut feeling when they went to places, and they didn't really clearly understand what aspects of a team led to the most success. And what Billy Bean did, which was incredible, is he brought in data science, he brought in statistical analysis, he brought in correlative studies, and they really dissected what are the aspects and what are the core metrics of a team that lead to success, what are the best high ROI investments that I can make to be able to have a winning team. And in 2003, what they showed with the Oakland A's was that with a budget that was about a third of the size of the New York Yankees, the Oakland A's were able to compete competitively at the same level. That's incredible. The idea that we can achieve the same amount of impact with a third of the budget, this is exactly what open source needs today. It's important because crypto networks today, we have a lot of capital that we plan on deploying. We estimate that there's about $30 billion today sitting in ecosystem treasuries, and it's predominantly going to go towards things like open source software. And the better that we can allocate this capital, the more impact, the higher ROI that we can achieve per unit dollar, that's going to be critical to the success of any crypto network. For the most part, every single crypto network is funding towards this graph right here. On one axis, high quality, highly engaging, useful developers building engaging applications that bring on sticky users on the y-axis here. Everybody wants this to go up and to the right, and we don't actually have a clear understanding of when we make grants, when we make funding allocations, what are the things that actually lead to this? What are the funding programs that are leading to real continued sticky users as opposed to just short-term blips in traffic? Historically, as an industry, we've been doing pretty terribly. We are investing more and more money every year, now on the order of tens of billions of dollars. And by some estimates, there's still only on the order of tens of thousands of developers in this entire space, which is kind of mind-boggling, right? These numbers are estimates, so you may not actually agree with the exact number figure, but I think there's one aspect of this graph, which is, I think, uncontestable, is that we have to be doing significantly better, like an order of magnitude better in allocating capital and keeping sticky users around and sticky developers around than we are today. What we want to do with Open Source Observer is create a data warehouse where we can bring on the visibility, we can make a public playground so that anybody can do these types of impact analyses. Similar to how tools like Bloomberg, data science tools, business intelligence tools have completely transformed traditional TradFi capital markets. For the impact markets, we are not at that level of visibility yet. And we want to build this as a public good for the community so that we can do this together. Which is why we're exceptionally excited to be doing this with one of our first flagship partners. It's Optimism RetroPGF. This is one of the ecosystem partners that are deploying a significant amount of capital today. This quarter, they plan on distributing about 30 million OP, that's over $60 million, to predominantly open source projects, over 300 open source projects today. And we're really proud that this small community of about 100 expert voters, we're helping them build out better lists, better impact analyses to better inform these votes. Because at the end of the day, their thesis is they need to be rewarding the projects with the highest impact in order to generate, the most growth into their network. We just finished voting, literally last week. We're excited to see what results come out in January, but we want to continue doing programs like this to help different ecosystems analyze the impact of their funding programs. Now, I just want to share a little bit about what are the types of things that we're looking at. We mostly just started on this journey. We want to look at things like how developers are coming onto the platform, which of these projects are leading to more developer growth than others. We also want to take a look at how collaborative these developers are, whether they're forking each other's projects, whether they're submitting fixes to each other's projects. That is one sign of healthy ecosystem growth. We also want to look at how they're engaging their open source community. Are they doing an effective job of growing that open source ecosystem, or are they staying, isolated in their own little pod? We're also looking at more traditional notions of metrics. We're also looking at things like simple, shallow metrics like stars and downloads. But I think one of the things that we're really excited to think about is downstream impact. In a world like Optimism RetroPGF, one of the things that's most interesting is that these things directly lead to revenue for the platform, right? If you think about a library, libraries, help build out these dApps. dApps are bringing users onto the platform. These users actually lead and translate to very visible revenue metrics in the form of sequencer fees for their network. And we want to understand the margin of value of any particular project and how these are affecting the global revenue of the network. Part of that, and one of the areas where we're diving really deep, is now we can start to do interesting things like user segmentation, right? We can take a look at what types of users are the most high value, which ones are transacting large, dollar amounts, which ones are transacting frequently versus infrequently, and basically do the types of user analytics on an ecosystem level that historically we've mostly been doing on a project level. It's very common for individual dApps to use user analytics. We want to look at this from an ecosystem-wide level. This is basically the thesis of the Optimism RetroPGF experiment. This is lifted directly from their website. They believe that if they take a portion of their sequencer fees in perpetuity and put them into a program like RetroPGF, and allocate that capital well to bring the most high-value developers, to bring the most high-value users onto their platform, that's gonna bring the most engaging applications and the highest amount of demand for their block space, which effectively translates into more revenue that they can, again, deploy into RetroPGF in this virtuous cycle. And the fundamental question that we wanna ask is this working? Like, are they actually doing something that's yielding, a net positive change in their ecosystem? And we don't have a conclusive answer to that yet, but we have some early signals and some indications that we're not just, bringing on traffic that's temporary. There's actual sustainable growth here that's kind of interesting. So this is a graph of developers that are in the Optimism RetroPGF ecosystem over the years. And it's not just the case that we have new projects that are attracted to Optimism because of RetroPGF existing. That's this darker red graph here. It is also the case that if you are a project that's generating high impact, RetroPGF now gives you the ability to have additional revenue, additional capital to hire on more developers. So we're also seeing that people that have been participating in round after round now have the resources to continue making more impact if they're historically the projects that have been doing well in prior RetroPGF rounds. We're just at the very early days of this form of impact data science. As you can see, a lot of the analyses that we're doing are still pretty primitive, but this is one of the areas that I think is most exciting because we're just at the early days of, as a community, understanding how to measure impact. Like, what is impact in any particular community? What is the best way to measure that? What is a way to do this in a way that's less gameable? And how do we figure out what good looks like? And that's something that ultimately I think we have to do as a community together in a crowdsourced way. So we think of Open Source Observer as the tool to do that. We want to bring on-chain data, off-chain data in a single data warehouse in a way that's, we're committed to being open source, open data, and open infrastructure. As a tool, we want to build this in a way such that it makes the data as widely available to the public as possible so that we can all collaborate on doing these types of community data science over impact for public goods. It's kind of crazy what kind of a year we've had. Hoka just spoke yesterday about the work that's been done on hyperboards and Hypersource Marketplace. It's kind of mind-boggling to think that we just launched the Hypersource protocol like earlier this year. But it's been a really interesting year, and we're excited to be growing out this ecosystem. We've been building out the Hypersource SDK so that other people can incorporate Hypersource into their ecosystem. And in particular, at Kyriba Labs, we're very excited to bring on and expand the world of impact measurement and impact evaluation. We think that's going to be critical to unlocking value in the Hypersource ecosystem. Bringing back the original vision of what we wanted to build, you can tell here we're just in the early days of what we need to be doing. You can think of Open Source Observer as just a small part of this picture, measuring just for one impact domain, which is open source software, and RetroPGF, which is just one funder, a single funder with a single set of value systems for a particular crypto ecosystem. But there's so much work that we still need to do together. In the world of impact evaluations, we've only been indexing projects in the Optimism ecosystem, and we're now starting to build out what we call the Kyriba Data Collective. We want to build out this open source data warehouse so that anybody can be rewarded for contributing valuable data when measuring the impact of public goods. We want to be able to reward the types of data scientists that are generating the most insightful insights or the most useful dashboards towards measuring impact. And we want to do this in a way such that we're building out effectively a data DAO where with the community, we can do this together. So impact analysis and experimentation, I think of this as like exceptionally early days. We're excited to work with folks in the community to build out this data warehouse together and to build the most useful analyses. So if you're interested, please come find me after this talk. One of the things that we are very aware of and need to start thinking about now is what happens when we do this regularly. RetroPGF, we're only on our third round, but they have a commitment to do this every year, multiple times every year. And what I think we're only in the early days of understanding is what are the incentives, what happens to this from a game theory mechanisms design perspective when you actually do this regularly. Because if all you're doing is funding downloads, you're gonna get perverse incentives and you're gonna get bad behavior. And so how do we design metrics that are less gameable? How do we design systems that analyze impact in a way that incentivizes the good stuff and not the gaming and spam? That's a really difficult question. I don't have an answer for that yet, but I think we need to figure this out together. And the answer is not don't measure, right? That seems to be kind of silly. From a funding perspective, RetroPGF is obviously just one ecosystem. Every single ecosystem has a different thesis and a different set of value systems and a different set of goals. And we're excited to work with different ecosystems and funders to understand what are the unique properties of this community and how do we build it in a way, how do we do this in a way that's general purpose that can satisfy the unique needs of any particular network. We're particularly excited about potential shared goals between ecosystems so that if two ecosystems have a goal that they want to fund together, we can potentially create collaborative funding pools around them. And lastly, of course, this is just in the space of open source software, and as people have mentioned in this conference multiple times, that is just a small space in the world of public goods. We want to do this in a way that explores other spaces as well. But we think because it's so measurable here, we can make some early impact and hopefully extract these learnings and apply them to other spaces. What I'm really excited about here is we think RetroPGF, hypercerts, retroactive funding, these types of novel mechanisms have the opportunity to massively transform how we think about public goods funding. And we're just at the early days of partnering with a handful of ecosystems, but this is a much bigger problem than just in crypto. And what we're particularly excited about is this growing recognition from governments, this growing recognition from nonprofits and other corporations that digital public infrastructure is infrastructure that we all need to invest in. And we're hoping that what we learn from here can be something that's applied well beyond what we do in crypto. So if you're interested, please join us at our Telegram community. You can find our QR code here. Help us and join us in our mission to fund public goods. Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you, Raymond, for that share.